Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great as well. Thank you so much.
Yes, yes. Thank you so much for doing this. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Yes. So before we kind of get into it, first of all, my name is Maya. I have a very, very humble YouTube channel. We're talking like 60 subs. Okay, so like again, thank you. You're doing this like out of the goodness of your heart, and I really
My
appreciate that.
pleasure. It's my pleasure
Yeah.
too. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, and I've been a big fan for a few years now. I've really enjoyed your content,
Thank you
and
so
have
much.
gotten yes, yes, and I've gotten a lot out of it too. Either having a bad day or even on the creator side of things that you've shared information-wise of how you go about film production, how you make your videos and things like that.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, yeah. So the first question, you've had an interest in film since you were 8 years old, right?
Yeah, it had to be around then, probably 7 to 8, because I remember always going to Borders bookstore and getting a copy of Video Maker magazine. And I think it all came from being obsessed with like the behind the scenes things that you saw on like Disney Channel or a little bit later when DVDs started to exist when, the featurettes. I was obsessed with like green screen. I wanted to be able to do special effects really badly. And now you can do it on your phone with like zero effort. But it took me a while to get software that was capable of editing. Because before that, I was editing on a VCR, just like shooting and then recording to a second VCR
Oh my god.
um, to get the clips in order. And then I got this toy. It was like a blue video camera that could record 4 minutes of video, and then you could put it onto your PC and like add some effects and stuff. So that was probably ages 9 and 10, and eventually I was able to get an actual video camera and started using iMovie and just like so I feel I it feels very second nature, video editing to me. And it's only when I started working professionally that I realized how kind of fluent the medium had become after all of that time. And sort of like I owe a lot of my ability to have a tempo and a format in my content to the fact that I've just been like, I did my 10,000 hours early on in life. If it
Yeah,
takes 10,000 hours to be an expert in something.
right.
So yeah, it's like one of those things where it's like, some people can just sit at a piano and play. I think that's an amazing talent. And I guess it's equally as fun to be able to just dive in on video content and convey an idea, at least I think effectively. So yeah, but yeah, age 9 and 10, I wanted to move to Hollywood right away. I wanted to become Steven Spielberg because that's the only filmmaker I knew of at the time.
Right.
But then M. Night Shyamalan became a big role model of mine too once Sixth
Uh-huh.
Sense and Signs came out.
Yeah. So is that what inspired you to make Vanilla County?
It definitely was the start of that horror movie obsession that I still have to this day. Um, I would say M. Night Shyamalan's work more directly inspired this short movie I created for an AOL scary movie contest called In the Night, which was my big claim to fame in seventh grade because I won this AOL Film Festival and I got a new video camera from them, which I think I still have over there. And I got to be like on the local newspaper and call into the local radio station. And then like that Halloween, I got a call from a producer at the Sharon Osbourne show. She had a talk show at the time. And they flew me and my mom out and I got to be on the TV show. And that was like, then I got to be on the local newspapers again because I had flown out to Hollywood. So that definitely, I feel like, really set me up to be like, okay, it gave me a lot of confidence. I'll say, like, I was like, I can, do this. I'm going to keep doing it. To say nothing of my parents and my family who were so supportive of my creative endeavors always, and my sisters who I forced to be in the movies, and great teachers who let me not do a poster and do a video instead. Like they would always be like, okay, it doesn't really matter, but they would let me show the whole class. So I was privileged in that way, that I was able to access a certain amount of equipment and a computer and encouragement from the people around me. And the horror movie thing is, yeah, like I think also there was a period of like I was diagnosed with depression, like many kids are, around age 11, and that's when I really got into the more macabre horror writing, I would say, and I think it took my parents a minute to process that creative outlet and make sure that it wasn't anything dangerous, just the way that I was working through things. And I still feel like horror films are a great way for not only the filmmaker, but the people watching it to process these kind of primal fears that we all have. You know, the fear of the unknown, fear of death, and then any other phobia that happens to be featured in the work. So I think I loved horror movies as soon as I was no longer terrified of having nightmares from them. Because like as a kid, I was terrified. Insomnia, afraid to go to sleep. But then I was like, you know what? I like looking into the abyss, and
Yeah, yeah.
it reminds us or I love how it gets a visceral reaction from audiences, right? Like it's laughing is great too, but I was not as confident in my comedy skills at that time. As a shy little soon to be queer boy, it was very accessible to lean into the dark and the depraved. And now I kind of still am able to do that, but with a sense of humor. I would say that's kind of the evolution. Also, horror is what got me, not that you asked yet, but the horror, the horror obsession is what got me into like special effects makeup and then beauty
Yeah.
makeup through that. And
Mhm.
through makeup, I really developed I reignited, I think, my appreciation for lighting and framing and just the different ways that we can translate our three-dimensional world into a two-dimensional plane, and how it is in many ways to me like painting. You're painting with light and you're painting with
Mhm.
objects, um, and you use those to tell your point of view to an audience. So
Mhm.
it's a long
That's
answer.
fascinating. No, no, that's great. That's great. Yeah, that's fascinating. You can tell me if this is not something you want to talk about, but through like watching many of your videos, you've dropped little, I guess, kind of pieces of your life and I think your adolescence. And from what I've gathered, it seems like you struggled a lot with substance abuse and things like that, but you are such a positive person now, and it seems like you live a fairly sober life. So I was just curious, like, how all these things come together, like the creativity and the coping and the healing and things like that.
Sure. Yeah. I think a lot. I mean, first of all, I love to be able to talk about those topics in my content because I think the stigma of addiction is so prevalent, and that prevents a lot of people who are struggling from getting help, or keeps us in the closet, right? And that was, I think, the main, especially in college, like through film school, when I was really back to drinking heavily. As a teenager, I'd gotten treatment for the alcohol abuse, and then again in college, it really became quite a big part of my life, and it sort of contributed to this like false self, right? Like I wanted to
Hmm.
act like everything was perfect, and that included like keeping up like a very positive, you know, attitude, and being the fun drunk. It was always, and I always got that comment. It was always like, "You're so fun when you get drunk, and you don't get too messy." It's like not in public, but yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I was the one who would go like throw up in the trash can, and like if I got it on my sweatshirt, I would like just take it off and throw it away and be like, What sweatshirt?" Like I was just like trying to keep it together the same way I
Yeah.
would to like hide it from my parents when I was 15.
Hmm.
Um, and so I think it does fit in. Like I think there are so many creative people who struggle with addiction, obviously. And I think for me at least, a lot of this has to do with life is very traumatic in many ways. I mean, life is beautiful in many ways, but especially sense, we live in a society where mental health care is deprioritized and often stigmatized, despite having access to therapy as a child and even in college. It's still work, right? Even if you get over
Mhm.
those cultural barriers to access therapy, it still then requires you to have an honest, open relationship with that therapist and be willing to see things about yourself that you
Yeah.
didn't before, and have this sort of relationship with your brain and my mental illness that is hard, because anxiety is painful. Depression is really painful as well. It presents itself in these really physically detrimental ways. And alcohol, drugs, like those are all ways to cope with this, to numb this, because it is faster and easier than the long term ways that we help manage anxiety or develop a relationship with anxiety. So, the other way that I like to help manage my own anxiety or process my emotions is through creativity, getting into a creative flow. Even if the project that I'm working on is not directly like, this film represents my depression, it's just
Right.
it's a creative process that I've been confident and comfortable in for decades now. And it's so easy to just get sucked in, right? The same way I think a writer who's doing a fictional story would.
Mhm.
And with this place where I am now, making YouTube content and writing comedy through that, it feels like I can make it as expressive or as relevant to whatever I'm going through as I want. I can make the comedy about things that are happening to me. And I can really kind of use it as a way to tell people things about myself without telling them, and it
Yes.
still
Yes.
feels, but in a way that still feels authentic and honest to the audience, especially those who have been watching over a period of time. As you said, you kind of pick up little hints here and there where it's like, I don't need to tell the world my whole
Mhm.
business necessarily. I don't share anything that I don't feel comfortable with. But then there are times where I'm like, wow, I can't believe I said that, but I'm gonna go ahead and post it because it's not great. I'm not so unique. I think that was
Mhm.
one aspect of treatment and alcohol addiction that really I carry with me, is that it's so easy for us to all think that we're terminally unique, in that it worked for you, but it won't work for me. I could never have what they have because I need to drink all the time. And it's like, you're not so different, that you can't
Mhm.
have whatever you want. If someone else has it, you can too. And addiction also, I think, comes with this like duality where it's like this sense of grandeur, or same uniqueness, where it's like, I'm special, I'm, funny, I'm this or that. And it's like feeling really good about yourself in certain areas, but then like super insecure in other ways. And, like I always came off as confident even when I was deep in my alcoholism. But I wasn't. I was confident in my ability to talk to people and charm them and speak eloquently, but I wasn't happy with the way I looked. I wanted to make myself, invisible or smaller, or I was often self-conscious physically.
Mhm.
And it's like, how do I use this alcohol to spread the part that seems most confident about myself and cover up all of that insecurity, because it's like I had this obsession with being perfect. Like, it's very hard to tolerate when people aren't happy with me, or the a never-ending project of image management, trying to control my reputation
Mhm.
in other people's eyes. It's all a fool's errand. And maybe that's another area of comfort in making YouTube content, is like, as far as
Mhm.
that video goes, I'm in control of what
Yeah.
goes on camera and what doesn't, and I get to think about what I've said as I'm editing and determine if it is what I want to share, or if it comes off the way that I want. If I saw this as a third person, would it be funny? That's how
Mhm.
the litmus test for all of my comedy is like, would I think this was funny if I didn't know me and I heard it? So it all kind of fits together into this like web of being self-aware and introspective, and thankfully, after a certain period of time, like willing to learn and change and let go of the things that don't serve, or cutting the
Mhm.
scenes that don't work, all of that. It feels
Yeah.
very much like it's like emulating the process of life, editing down a
Mhm.
movie into to the parts that you'll remember or that people will remember about you.
Yeah, you kind of talked about that, but I wonder um, if it's almost kind of liberating in a way to do content creation after having to drown and compensate a lot of that need to make things look perfect. And now you're perfectly imperfect. You know what I mean? Like you can be a little flawed and a little silly and a little goofy, but at the end of the day, your message still comes across when you make something, even if you're talking about, you know, a Disney Channel movie or something. Like you still will
Yes.
have these tangential calls to action. Like if they mention one little thing about weather changes, you're like, hold on, let's stop real quick and talk about climate change and why this matters. And
Yeah.
that's something I love too. Like why why is that so important to you to like kind of weave those little messages in?
Thank you, first of all. And yeah, I feel I've always been, or especially since sort of becoming politically aware in high school, I would say, um, it's easy for me to get angry at the state of politics since, since before I even graduated high school, when it was marriage equality was the big thing,
Mhm.
and since before that, climate change. Like at this point, it's scary when you think about the fact that unless we are invent some sort of new technology that's like really innovative, the planet is past the point of no return. Like we've killed it. So it's not going to be the same Earth for future generations as it is for us. And I get mad when I think about how the government, which was in the US, very racist and misogynistic since its inception, despite the way they sort of wash over that in public schools when you're younger.
Mhm.
Um, it's like the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, and those same people are still in power. It's
Yeah.
still them clutching on because to enrich themselves personally. It's like that's the same generational wealth that Black people and Indigenous people and many people of color were unable to accumulate throughout their family history. And it's the same political power that's been passed down because you know what, their cousins own big oil and they lobby for their donations. It's like such a corrupt system in so many ways that it's almost laughable when you're in one of these marginalized groups when they say land of the free, all men are created equal. It's like
Mhm.
that wasn't true when you wrote it. It was like you didn't
Yeah.
mean it when you wrote it. Like there were all of these asterisks when you said it the first time.
Mhm.
And now we're so many years later that people interpret it to be true, especially if they're speaking from a place of privilege.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and those are the people I often feel like are voting against the interests of equality,
Yeah.
LGBTQ plus equality, the reproductive rights of women and people who can become pregnant. It's like if you're not in a position where you don't have you don't have the choice or all of the same choices that these people, then yes, it's easy to say, no, I'm going to hold up my religion as an excuse for why you shouldn't be allowed to do what you want to do. Same with climate change, right? It's like we are not doing anything because there's money to be made. Like we didn't start in the 80s popularizing the electric car. We didn't start
Yeah.
really caring about any of this stuff, and we still aren't I'm speaking, and we as in our government who
Mhm.
represents us and has the real power to make changes by um I would say starting with businesses starting to really penalize businesses for their carbon footprint. But the business is who's in bed with the government. So
Mhm.
instead, it comes back down to who? Oh, the liberals who need to then recycle everything, buy a Prius, do everything we can when in fact it's not going to have as much of a difference as it could from just one governing body making legislation. Gun control, same exact thing. We're not in a colonial war anymore. We're not in a civil war. There is no militia.
Yeah.
There is and it's like the interests of a few at the cost of thousands of lives,
Mhm.
and untold suffering beyond the loss of life, just untold sadness
Yeah.
and heartbreak and oppression. And that's how I feel when I think about oppressed minority groups, is that it's just people who want the equality that was promised to us as kids in first grade when we learned about America.
Mhm.
And then the people who don't realize that we don't all have that because it's so hard to see outside of themselves, or they can and they just don't care. So I find humor, effectively executed humor, is a good way of helping things get into people, because it
Mhm.
shows, I think laughter breaks down a lot of barriers. If you can
Yes.
make somebody laugh, I think that it is disarming
Mhm.
enough that I know I've heard comedy where I'm like, oh my God, like that just opened my eyes to this privilege I wasn't even aware of, because this person who comes from a completely different background than me made a joke about the ridiculous like racism they might have experienced, or
Mhm.
microaggressions that I didn't realize people had to deal with. So it is like an honor for me to be able to incorporate these types of messages into things or pieces of content that people want to watch for entertainment value, because it's kind of like, okay, yeah, you get you hide the vegetables within the cake
Yeah.
or whatever. It feels a spoonful of sugar, if you will.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of easy comedy, obviously, out there, and it just feels like it would be a missed opportunity if I couldn't. I'm not being myself if I'm not here
Yeah.
and there ranting about something that matters to me.
Mhm.
And I've always just, I to the point of a fault, I think I've always been very cognizant of other people's feelings, like even just starting with just like one-to-one relationships, like, is my teacher mad at me? Is my sister okay because my mom yelled at her? This type of thing. And as my awareness of the country, of the planet, and all of its imperfections started to grow, and it's like I just throw myself into people's shoes sometimes, and it's like that's. And after coming out of the closet as a queer person, it's like the oppression of cis het society, where everyone is just you're born straight until you come out. Like that whole notion was really stressful for me, and I can only imagine it was for other people in under the umbrella. But then I can easily relate that to someone who cannot speak English in this country, or someone who has to deal with these racist microaggressions, police brutality, fearing for one's safety and one's life. Like in all of these situations, like there are things that I could never even think about experiencing.
Mhm.
Being afraid of the police in that way was not something that I had to worry about as a child, but I was terrified of people finding out this thing about me. I was terrified about getting beaten up or being disowned. My
Mhm.
parents are wonderful, but I, as a kid, didn't know because it was different than what I thought was expected of me. So I had no precedent to understand what would happen to me if they ever found out. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I can only extrapolate that anxiety and that mortal terror and imagine that for those who have to really fear for their lives, trans people, people of color, it's like, no, I have not experienced that, but I can imagine. And it's like, we often use like colloquially, like, I can't imagine having to go do that. I can
Mhm.
imagine that it's really hard and really bad. And it's
Yeah.
like not fair that everybody doesn't see that.
Yeah.
And you're not allowed to express that without having these other labels attributed to you that are also racist and microaggressive. So
Mhm.
um, I really try to think about the people walking this road with me, and I think I lose a little bit of sympathy for the people who don't extend that to the rest of humankind. You know, they worry about their self-interests above all. You know, the greed is too much. So I don't want to come off as preachy ever in my videos, and I think that humor is a great way to deflect that sort of stonewalling that people can do when they have a differing opinion than you. And also just being myself, being, as you said, perfectly imperfect. It's like there was a campaign throughout the 70s and 80s where gay men and lesbian women would go on bus tours through the country into areas that were known to be very conservative or homophobic, and just integrate themselves into the community and be through community events or parties or whatever. It wasn't queer themed specifically. It was just like, how are you gonna hate me now that you know me and and we've broken bread? And I think this happens a lot when a conservative politician's child ends up coming out of the closet. It's like, if you really love this child of yours, how then are you going to pretend that you do not see the oppression that they will be living under as soon as this law gets enacted, or if you repeal those rights? Is there something that getting to meet different people obviously opens our horizons? And that's why I feel like the more authentically myself I am, the more chance there is I'm going to say something that hits on uh, the boyfriend, the straight boyfriend of the woman who's watching my videos, and I get those messages where it's like, I'm a straight blah blah blah, this or that cis het man, and I still love your videos, and it's very gratifying because I don't necessarily walk around thinking of myself as a queer person. I think of myself as a person who's very proud of their queer identity, and it's like an antidote to those experiences that I had as a child, where I'm like just being me, pursuing my interests, and getting this weird response from adults, where you're like, oh, I guess that person doesn't like me. And then as I grow older, realizing they could tell you were gay, and they didn't like your effeminate behavior. They didn't like they were uncomfortable around me. And so it's like, it hurts retroactively, to think that you could as a child just be like invalidated in this way and not have the vocabulary or the awareness or the experience to even talk to an adult about it. You couldn't even talk to anyone about it because it was something I hadn't figured out for myself. So it's a rewarding experience to be able to sit on camera and be myself and make people laugh in the process. I mean, it's definitely the reason I started the whole project, and it leads to new areas of self-discovery along the way, which is great.
Yeah. I loved your video yesterday featuring Governor Hunty. I thought that was wonderful.
Thank you.
Yes, I think there already is value in advocacy, and I don't think you inherently need to go into politics to have what you do make a difference. But have you ever considered going into politics in some way at all?
I haven't, mainly because I feel like just being a public-facing queer person in this medium already opens the door for plenty of opposition research, if you will. People often who don't agree with something or my viewpoints or whatever want to use the way I look or the way that I talk or the way that I present, or even just going through my social media to use things against me or invalidate those points. And it's like, that's fine. That doesn't touch me where I live, because it's like, you can feel you're over there, and this is me making money by saying whatever I want. So it's hard for me to feel threatened by it often. But to think that my life would then have to be an open book, my whole past, the background checks, the research, like there are pictures of me floating around in people's cell phones that I don't want leaked, and I also would be aware of the responsibility of making choices or fighting for legislation that truly was helpful and not just helping a certain group while neglecting another. The nuances of it, I feel intimidated by. I
Mhm.
feel much more comfortable as an ally or an advocate of certain groups or topics because I can speak on them as far as I'm able to understand. I really am grateful for the politicians who are out there always pushing for progress and for the rights of all Americans and not just the ones who have historically had power. And also, I feel like being visibly queer is a political enough act for me.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and I sometimes wonder, like it's easy to shut down a politician if they're not on your side. And I'm guilty of it too. That politics are very divisive. So it's like if someone comes on screen with parentheses R next to their name, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. You're not going to get my vote because that would be a vote against all of my interests. However, when I'm in a YouTube video that gets recommended, I think it exposes people to queerness a lot more subtly. It's more like getting on that bus and going to that small town and
Mhm.
being like, oops, you made friends with me. Now, how do we feel about making it illegal for me to have children type of deal? It's,
Right.
um, I think it's a more personal way of changing political opinions or helping people see a point of view that they might not have even listened to before.
Mhm.
So I feel more effective. Not that I've ever ran for any political office, but I feel that I can be more effective by using this medium that I love so much, which is storytelling, video editing, writing, wordplay, comedy, all of whatever amalgamation of traits and skills it requires to do the work that we do. I feel so adept at it sometimes that it's like this has got to be the answer for me to like
Mhm.
um, communicate effectively.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It
as
seems
opposed
like
to speech writing or policy making
yeah.
or whatever, I don't even know what politicians do half the time. It's like there's so many aspects of it that I
Mhm.
couldn't even fathom. Sitting in meetings, ugh, could never go back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It seems like you're very much in the right place that you need to be at.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
I love the idea of where it can go. It's
Mhm.
something that is scalable mm, and it's mine. It's my company. It's got my
Mhm.
name and face on it, and I don't work for the American people, which is a scary thought because
Yeah,
they're not all
yeah.
not all good bosses out there. So
Right, right. Yeah, how has that been? Because that's a pretty big, exciting thing for you to now be a business owner, to be full time, because I imagine you didn't just from your first video about Megan Trainor were like, okay, quitting my job, doing this, jumping all in. So what has that journey been like for you to be like, holy shit, now I get to do this for a living?
again, it was one of those things that just like it reminded me a lot of when I won that first contest, that movie
Mhm.
contest from AOL, where afterwards I was like, I think I think I can do anything.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna apply for that next contest that I see. I'm gonna write another movie.
Mhm.
I remember back in 2016, God, so long ago it feels like. I remember starting with that first video. That can't be right. Oh God, whenever it was, 2017, that first video, I did it with the intention of being able to make a full-time job out of it, which is like what I saw other people doing. I did
Mhm.
a lot of research. I was like, am I understanding correctly? Like people can make a livable income off of this platform. And I was working in social media at the time. Did not enjoy the relationship that I had with my boss. I felt rather mistreated or like stifled and oppressed in a lot of ways by it, but I was also experiencing this like new burst of energy that came from getting off of of my alcoholic routine for the first time in 4 or 5 years So it just occurred to me, I was like, this is something that takes a long time. Like I
Mhm.
remember researching like for a few weeks before I made a video and being like, it looks like these creators all for like 4 years were making not huge views, not getting huge view numbers. And then it just like blasted off. So I was like, I'm 26. By the time I'm 30, it'll have been 4 years. Like I've got 4 years right now. My job at the time was working remotely. I was working from home before it was cool. And I was like, I have the youthfulness, I have the energy of the idle time, right? Like I don't have kids, I don't have a mortgage, I don't have these responsibilities that kind of start to really build up and become a part of life as time goes on. So I recognized that was an opportunity. And I had this skill set of having been to film school. People thought I was funny in daily life, and I had formal training in comedy writing, and I had the tenacity to like be like, I'm going to do this as a second time job with no return, no monetary
Mhm.
return for as long as it takes, because I need to enjoy the process. Even if no one's watching, it's like, then if you get what you want eventually, then and you hated doing it, like then
Right.
it's not going to be the dream come true that I was hoping for. So I took those 4 years. It ended up being almost exactly 4 years when my
Mhm.
Shane Dawson video came out on the chair and really started earning me an income that I was able to leave my corporate job with. So I used the time up until then to really get comfortable on camera, to find my voice. Built a small community. I think I was around 8,000 subscribers by the fourth year. And there were days where I just didn't want to do it. There were days when I was like, it's never going to happen. It's the I see people growing so much faster for whatever reason, but then I would just be like, you know what? Their story is not my story. Just keep your head down and keep going. I mean, whatever. You have the job, Nicholas. Like you have the I
Yeah.
was working as a social media manager and then a brand manager for the beauty industry. And I was like, I'm getting a lot of satisfaction just out of being able to maintain my own life. Like I was
Mhm.
paying my own bills, paying my own rent for the first time since forever. Cause, you know, the addiction really just prevented me from making those strides. I was enjoying that, the satisfaction of being able to live out my late 20s without the drama, without all of the anxiety. I mean, I was anxious as hell about a lot of things, but not about where my next paycheck was coming from, how I was going to pay rent, what I was going to have to do to pay rent. You know, it was all a big relief. And that kind of allowed me to say, okay, so then let's put in the work. And so then when it happened, and I after a while, it started to feel like I just want to work for myself, and I completely forget about the a fact that it is all of those new subscribers are people who enjoy my personality or want to hear what I have to say or send me these amazing messages that just like remind me, because I in the process I also got obsessed with YouTube. I was like, I'm gonna
Mhm.
get into watching this. Like I wasn't a
Yeah.
huge YouTube viewer before I started working on it, but I wanted to really get a feel for what was working. I wanted to know the trends. I wanted to see who was winning. Shane Dawson was winning at the time.
Yeah.
um, couldn't really get through a lot of those, but I mean, at the beginning, he was in his tasting every flavor of Baskin Robbins era type of
Mhm.
videos, which, I now know anecdotally from his other content that was a dark time for him, but you wouldn't have known it. It brought like, and other creators too that remain, I think, good role models. I would hate my job, but I would watch them every morning and they would just like
Mhm.
calm my nerves and make me laugh and remind me that there is something outside of this terrifying, stressful experience that I have to drive into every morning. So to then hear that feedback that I'm providing that sort of levity for people in some way, or giving them a sense of validation for their gender identity, or feeling like my channel is a safe space in that the comedy doesn't seek to oppress anybody, and if it ever does, then I try to my best to humble myself enough to hear the feedback. So when I find out that that's also comes along with it, like that I become a part of people's lives, it's very satisfying. It's like I got the job that I wanted to get through sheer hard work and not giving up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I was like, my dad just, and again, the privilege of having great parents. My dad always said, just never give up, whatever it is, just never give up. And I was like, it's crazy to think like I didn't, even on my worst days, I didn't give up, and then I had people in my life, the support system, moving out to California at the time, whereas like I also had these cool people who weren't my parents telling me when to relax, take the day off, you need to chill. And it's like all of those people left handprints on me that it's like by the time I'm here and it seems on camera like I'm this intelligent, well-spoken, positive person, it's like, thank you. And yes, I do feel that way most times, but it's like there were so many jagged rock faces that one has to scale to get to that point, to get anything that they want in life. So it's very humbling. It's very gratifying, and it's very shocking sometimes when it's like life really is what those stupid expressions say. It's like I can see the truth in all of them.
Yeah.
So it's very rewarding. And if anything, it's like what's next but to like, yes, I want to keep growing, but I also recognize that I have gotten for myself everything that I need to feel okay, to feel safe, to be, food, shelter, medical care, community, sense of support, a family, chosen family, and like what's left to do, but you know, look down and see who else is like on that jagged rock face, trying to get what they want, whether it's the dream job or the acceptance or the self-acceptance. It's like, it's a journey, and all I can do is share my story. It's not very actionable, I find, to tell people, stop worrying about it, keep trying, but through the stories of our lives, we can really make examples that people relate to, and they're like, I'm going through something similar, and they did it, they made it. So while it might seem to some like it's like, sometimes it feels like I'm just talking about myself, but I realize that as humans, we are looking for ourselves in other people. I think that's human nature as like social creatures. So there is always value in sharing our stories, and therefore it can only help more people if we help amplify the voices of others. So that's where I'm kind of at with it now, where it's like, wow, I'm lucky, I'm privileged, I have all of this, I have this platform, and there are people who don't, or who are going to have an even harder time than me because of the way that they look or the way that they present. And it's like, how do we try to identify those people and help? How can I authentically help, like find another spotlight to shine on them? It's not even about sharing the spotlight, because like, there are enough spotlights for everyone.
Right.
So it's been a very powerful kind of internal transformation in that way as well, where like I've always cared about social progress, but for a long time it was like, yeah, I just want equal rights for gay people, because that's my experience as a gay person, is that I don't have that. But now it's like, and so imagine then being a trans woman of color, where it's like, that's all of society's least favorite things, apparently, for zero reason. So it's like the ability to see outside of myself a little bit more, but then use myself as a tool to help, hopefully in some way, bring comfort or change to the world that's positive. So
That's really wonderful. I love that. That's a great way to live your life. Um, I imagine that doing that for such a long time and pretty consistently with your uploads was exhausting. And now that you're full time, you have that added, like, okay, I need to be sure I have consistent income. Would you have a Patreon? So, plug in that right now.
shout out to
So that probably
Patreon,
helps.
the
Yes,
Patreon family. Yes. Yeah.
yes. But I'm sure, AdSense is still helpful, growing your channel is still helpful. So when you see there's a new Shane Dawson video or a Ryland video or a Jeffree Star video, do you feel an immense sense of dread? Or do you still have like okay, I'll enjoy doing this roast once again?
Oh, yeah, not dread, more relief. Just because, simply
The
because,
algorithm is in
yeah,
my favor.
it's
Yes,
on my
yes.
side. We got to win. Because once I started doing it full time, as you just said, it's no longer like, I'm just building this, but I have my day job. It's like, I want to keep this up. I don't always know if I were to take this amount of time off or not post, how that would affect the algorithm or whatever. And also I just became acutely aware that like YouTubers sometimes are in and then at the top of the game, and then they're out, and not because they were canceled, just because the tides turned, the people weren't into that content, their audience got older. So that definitely plays on my lifelong fear of the future. Will I be okay in next year type of thing. It sometimes is as short term as like, will I be okay this Friday when I'm supposed to upload, because this sponsor now, I'm responsible for getting their video out on time, and I have management and agencies and accountants and business managers, payroll guys, like 401k. Like I'm trying to do all of these things to invest in myself to future proof the business of making YouTube content as much as one can, right? Because it is so unpredictable. It could all go away, I realize, and it wouldn't take the most effort in the world to trigger something like that from what I can see in other people's experiences. And so I try to learn from that and make responsible choices in terms of staying motivated, keeping the consistency up, and pulling those long nights and saving and investing. And I want the work that I'm doing now, which is, thankfully I feel really fairly compensated for those late nights. I want to try to make that revenue work for me as much as I can over the years, so that even if everything falls apart and I go back to working in an office, I'll still be able to say, it got me that retirement money, or it got me this house that I have, or, those are the goals currently, is to be able to retire and buy a home. And so when something like Shane's video comes out that I know will be a hit, just because it's like I will forever have this search engine optimized link between me and his name, because those are my million view videos. The three videos that have gotten a million views have his name in the title. And that's not to say that I'm like hope he's always hope he's always on the downside of culture, but on a week-to-week basis, when I know I have to get something out, and I'm always trying to make something clickable and enticing for the audience. Right now I know that that's like a good thing. But then that's why I'm also grateful that I was able to diversify to Disney Channel movies, Lifetime movies, these things that are fun and they've already been made. So like I can just dig through a back catalog of things and share my love of film and still get, clickable content out. But yes, when there's a topic that I know is trending and I watch the content and I feel there's like this thing that'll happen like within a few minutes of the video starting where I'm like, oh, yep, I'm saying funny things in my head, like this is gonna work. And sometimes you're just like, what am I gonna fucking talk about this week? So it's very relieving when I don't have that. And again, organization helps, like planning my month ahead of time. And that calendar is something I share with my Patreon community. So it's like feeling responsible to the viewers is another motivating factor. I see some influencers sometimes who seem like they don't care. And it's like, I'm not talking trash. I am jealous sometimes, of the people who are like, I'm going to post or I'm not going to post, like whatever. It's like, I'm too anxious. I got to do it. Even if I'm on a vacation, I'm working on it, or, and it's like, that's an area where I want to find more balance always. But I know on the other side of that same problem of caring too much is caring the right amount about how my words affect other people, or wanting to be there for them, wanting them to have a video to be there for them. Because you never know what someone's going through this week. Maybe it's going to help them smile when they couldn't, because God knows I've had, love sickness and breakups and the death of loved ones, and YouTube creators were always there without knowing it for me. So I don't have to know how or the videos are helping, but I'm so grateful for the people who have told me such stories, because it confirms that it is helping someone in some way, as it's also helping me. So it's hard sometimes. The content is king, so they always want new, fresh stuff. They being YouTube and Google, but
Yeah,
also
yeah.
also the viewers. So it's
Mhm.
can be stressful. So when something comes out that I know will make even maybe newer people who haven't watched a video yet like click, then it's always a win because that's the goal, getting
Mhm.
new eyes as well as maintaining a relationship with the existing viewers. So yeah, I never dread the topics that I've perhaps touched on often, because they're old faithful, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's hard to come
Yeah.
up. It's hard to stay creative sometimes, and it is
Sure.
a little
Yeah.
bit of a break when something sort of falls into your lap like that.
Right, right, yeah. And when you decide like, okay, this is great for clip breakdown, I just wonder when I watch a lot of times because it's like your roasts seem so natural and so improvised that, but they're also very good. So I'm like, how much of it is written and planned, and how much of it is like, you know what? Let me, you just pop it out like that. You know what I mean?
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I've had this question before, and the best way I can describe it is it's this um kind of unique hybrid of both, right? Like I watch the content the first time off camera, and I just leave a marker in the video editing software wherever I'm like, oh, I have an opinion. I have something, a funny thought came to my head about that. And then I go back through and I have to cut it out into a little clip that's going to not get detected by the copyright,
Mhm.
whatever robot. So in that process, I'm like, okay, let me nail out what was the thought on this? Oh God, that lighting, it looks like Swiss cheese or whatever. And it's like, okay, so what's the joke? Like, there's got to be a punchline there. And I used to go through that whole process, like even as early as the Shane Dawson videos, I would go through that whole process live on camera and just edit out the thinking of what I was going to say.
Mhm.
But that came with a lot of sense of anxiety. Like, will I be able to think of something funny to say on the spot? It wasn't
Mhm.
helpful for me to like turn on the camera, nervous that this would be the video that everyone's like, you aren't funny here. And I know from my education in comedy writing that word choice can really make a big difference. You know, that's why jokes stand-up comedians write their material ahead of time. You know, it's because like
Mhm.
you can order the words in a particular way that makes it funnier. You can take a second to decide, is it funnier if I say, you know, this first or, last? Like what is going to subvert expectations the most? There's this example in one of my classes where it's like the scene starts with someone opening the door to their apartment and falling down the front stoop. Is it funnier if they have 5 steps or 3 steps to fall down? And it's like, wow, what a interesting question. Like, and there is likely an answer that one will make people laugh more than another. So as far as like the clips that I pull out, I usually make a note of something specific to the wording that I want to say so that I can really make it as funny as it was in my head,
Mhm.
when it comes across on camera. I want it to read, and I want to remember to inflect upon the right words. So that being said, I also have always loved improv comedy. I was in an improv troupe in high school, and I realized the importance of leaving lots of space for me to just go off and make up random things and say whatever came to my mind. And those are usually the parts that I find the most funny when I am watching the video back before uploading it, where it's like people can read that it was in the moment, and then the rest is not written down so specifically that I can't maintain the sense of spontaneity to it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it's like every time I go to a clip, the thing that I say right after that probably had a note written somewhere.
Mhm.
Um, and then I let the storytelling of whatever's happening in between, the technical aspect, like my thoughts on how this was achieved or how it could be better. I don't have the time to write that stuff down because it's like just the process I've described so far is time consuming to do twice a week. It's it serves multiple purposes to leave a lot of improv in there as well.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And whenever you do roast, like as fucking hilarious and sometimes vicious as it is, you still like come back to have an empathy for the people that you roast, you'll give a benefit of the doubt and be like, maybe this production looks like shit because they had a really low budget, and I can see how. And like, you always make a point to do that. So why do you do that?
Think I realize that in the process of making anything, full length movie or a YouTube video or a career as an influencer, we all have limitations. We only know what we know. I don't want to hurt somebody for not knowing something that they don't know. And it's like, I think that there's value in making people laugh while also giving like a little bit of, oh, maybe if we had written it this way. Or I think that's because they had a low budget. I would just wish they would have allocated more to the writer and more to the lighting than they did to like all of these random props or whatever. It's like, I think that there's still a way to be like, oh, yeah, I mean, everyone has the right pieces, the right ingredients to the recipe. It's just a matter of employing them properly. And as far as like, roast comedy, I realize that especially like someone like an influencer who's under the microscope for something, it could easily be me. And there are times in my time on YouTube where I have gotten a lot of feedback from multiple sources across multiple platforms about something that maybe I didn't quite get right, and it's stressful. It really is. And that's not nearly on the scale as someone who has millions of eyes on them, so I recognize the stress and the pressure. And even then, we can still make mistakes. So I think I just, at the end of it, recognize like, still a human being,
Yeah.
might be ignorant, maybe racist, maybe a little sexist, whatever the issue is, but they clearly didn't know that they were at the time or whatever.
Mhm.
Like, I can see those types of things. And at the end of the day, it's like, if this person were to come up to me and confront me about what I just said, like, would I be able to stand by it? Would I be able to hold, say like, like, I'm sorry that you were hurt. I did not want to hurt you, but my opinion remains the same about what I said. We don't always like what we hear as feedback,
Yeah.
and if it's told as a joke, I think people can really sense when something is like making fun of someone on a personal level or making fun of someone's position that they were in at the time, like this mistake they made because they weren't aware of their privilege, or this piece of content that came out because they don't even realize how lazy of a filmmaker they are. It's like, those are all fixable things, learnable things. And it's not necessarily coming at people for things that they can't change or
Mhm.
that are not their fault. So I try
Yeah.
to make that distinction for myself when I put something on paper. And it's like, yeah, I'm sure there are examples where I didn't do that. And I would be like, I try not to watch my old content because I'm sure it would make me cringe at certain points or
Yeah.
what have you. But at least I have a standard to hold myself to. And
Mhm.
so I can go from there. If I miss the bar, if I, but I don't want to play it too safe either because there's
Right.
comedy to be made. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
just having an awareness that of my own moral compass is a good starting point, and then being open to feedback. Whether or not
Yes.
I respond to it publicly, being able to receive it and incorporate it and not make the same mistake over and over again.
Yeah. And I think YouTube could use a lot more of that, to
Mm,
be honest. Um,
yeah,
but I appreciate that you do that. Um, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, so I have two more questions for you.
great.
Do you ever think about making a horror movie now that you're older and have more resources?
Yes, I do, especially as you said, because there is so much more that I know that I could put into it. I know so many amazing people to collaborate with. I think I suffered throughout film school as someone who's like, and this is why YouTube ended up being a great choice for me, is like, I'll do it all myself. I don't need to employ any outside help. And now I realize, like, no, the more eyes we have on it, the more creative juice we have pumping into this thing, the better it's going to be, the more people we can relate to with it. And outside of that, just like resources to make better films in general, I'm aware of. Um, so it's something I think about a lot. And then I temper that with my fatal flaw of getting really into my work schedule. Like now I'm like doing 2 videos a week. It's like, it's very hard for me to imagine at this point, how would a screenplay fit, writing a screenplay work there? Or do I even need to write a movie that I would direct to feel proud of it? Do I see myself as a writer director versus director? Like, what are the compromises on my childhood dream that would actually allow the dream to come true, you know? So that's always something that at this point I'm like, well, I'm just in it with YouTube right now, making this content and looking for, you know, always the way to grow and the next step, trying to get to that gold plaque. And it's like, but then again, I don't want those types of goals to prevent me from taking opportunities that might be life-changing as well. So yeah, the short answer, yes, I think about it often. But I also think about, like, you know, there's a lot of responsibility. If I'm gonna criticize all of these movies, am I gonna be able to take all of my own advice? Or would people be able to call me out for this, having empty coffee cups on screen, just like I'm always doing? And it's like, and even then, would I feel defensive because it's like, well, I had to because it was an insurance thing. The costume was rented and they had to have no liquid in the cup. And it's like, I don't want to be defending my work all the time either. So I not only think about making the content, but I think about where I'm at with my ego and how I would be receiving feedback on that. And if it wasn't successful, you know, like how much would that, or would that not affect my ability to keep doing the work that I love? So
yeah. And then what's your long term? I know, like you said, you don't really know the future, so maybe you don't have an answer to this, but what's your long term vision for your channel and your brand, and what are you kind of aspiring for next?
So I feel like the only goals that I have related to that, I try to have my goals be something that could be wrapped in a couple different casings. You know, it could be dressed up like a few different things, meaning I would love to be able to grow my audience and reach more people and earn more recognition as a brand, you know, as Nick DiRamio the entertainer, whether that means moving to a more mainstream medium, which I don't feel is out of the question in the age of on demand and streaming. There's a million networks that I've never even heard of that have a need for content. So I think there's never been a better time for a creator to make the jump to like a TV or streaming program of some sort, or whether it's being able to write a book, which I've always wanted to do. Memoirs, I love memoirs, and that really plays into like my love for storytelling, telling my own story and as a means of relating to others and expressing my humor, while also really, you know, getting the heavy moments in there too. So and then any other variation of that in this golden age, like we truly are living in this, like, I feel often like I was born at exactly the right time, because I don't necessarily need someone to hand me a book deal for me to publish a book. You know, it's like I just need, it's like we live in the age of self-publishing, and you also don't need to write a book to get your writing out there. I think about being a staff writer on a TV show or on a comedy type piece of entertainment, working in television. Like I feel very grateful that I have a formal film and television degree, so that all of those things feel like possibilities to me. And also I have this platform on YouTube where I get to, you know, I get emails from people who work in the industry, and I live in Southern California where TV is made. So it all feels like it's just on the other side of that YouTube door. And in the meantime, YouTube is a great place for me to practice my writing, practice being on camera, build an audience, and that's not at the hands of some boss who just wants to be is on a power trip, you know? I mean, I am with myself, I guess, but
but it's you, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I can forgive myself.
Yes.
So, it's like all of those things feel like possibilities. I don't know which one will come to fruition or if it'll be something entirely different that hasn't been invented yet. But I know that I'm on the right path. I feel confident, more so than when I was in a job that I hated, you know, working on marketing for these and bosses that I felt like didn't necessarily take my advice or trust my expertise or whatever. It's like I just wanted to break out and get on the way to people seeing me, and now I feel seen. So I know that with time it'll come if I just keep working. So just keep leveling up, I guess. That's the 5-year plan.
Sure. Cool. Well, I'll have your Patreon linked and on screen and all of that good stuff.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yes. Anything else you would like to plug?
Oh, just tune into Clip Breakdown twice a week on my YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out yet, I would love to see you in the comments section. And thank you so much, Maya, for having me on. This was such a fun conversation.
Yes, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. So yeah,
my pleasure.
All right. Well, have a good evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.